Very quickly now we have Dr. Yemi Kale, the Statistician General of Nigeria, with us via Skype from our Abuja studios. Dr. Kale, great to have you here and good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's very important. We understand your time is maybe your schedule is a little bit tight this morning, but please go ahead with the highlights of this inflation report for February.
Well, you summarized it pretty well. I think the key highlights, the CPI, which measures inflation, rose year on year by 8.4% in February from 8.2 in January. On a month-on-month basis, it rose by 0.7%. The food price increased by 9.4% year on year. This is up from 9.2% in January. And the core index, which measures all items less farm products, rose by 7%, up from rose to 7%, up from 6.8% in January. I think one of the things you did not mention, which I think a lot of analysts have been paying attention to, is for example, is the imported portion of the CPI. For example, imported food, the imported index rose by 8.8%. Now, this is the highest rise in the imported food index since February 2013.
Dr. Kale, please go ahead. We're sure that the imported food sub-index actually went up. If you look at the entire inflation data, do you have any concerns regarding these as far as the imported foods or index of the food index actually came through it?
I'm assuming you are relating this to the possible impact of the devaluation of the naira. But let me answer you by first addressing what I consider some misconceptions. A lot of people wrongly assume that companies, when faced with higher cost of production and the need to maintain profitability growth, will always just increase their prices just to pass on the additional cost to consumers. But they actually have they have several approaches. For example, they could do just that. They could just increase their prices and pass on the additional cost to consumers. But again, this depends on the price elasticity of demand for the product, the availability of close substitutes, and so on. So if they believe that it will be difficult to pass on these prices to consumers because they will just drop their product, they'll be reluctant to pass this on fully. Alternatively, which some other companies do, they can become more cost efficient because about maintaining profitability. They're cost efficient by maybe reducing advertising cost, marketing cost, even in some cases laying off staff and so on. So they can tackle it from both sides, either push up prices and pass on the additional cost, or try and be more cost effective. Or thirdly, they can do both. They can push on, try to pass on some of the additional costs as well as become more cost effective. So it's not just automatic that if they are faced with higher costs, the easiest thing is to pass the price on to consumers, but it depends, like I said, on the particular product, and one we call demand push inflation, and the other is cost push inflation. Now, the first, that's demand push inflation, is caused by the interaction between money supply and output. So, for example, an injection of cash in the system, which causes more cash to be chasing fewer goods, or it could also be caused by a reduction in output. So, money supply is constant, but there's a drop in output. So, either way, there's a lot more money chasing products, and that could lead to inflation. Now, there's no evidence of this. As of last month, money supply growth was actually negative. We are not seeing any significant drop in output. We will find that out at the end of the first quarter, but we are not seeing any indications that output has dropped. Neither have we seen any indication that money supply has increased, probably as a result of the combination of the fact that there's just no money in the system, also because CBN has been tightening, which of course makes savings more attractive and borrowing more expensive. So there's no evidence of that in the system. Now, the other, which is the cost push inflation, which is probably more relevant to the depreciation of the currency that you're referring to, which makes prices of inputs of raw materials more expensive or increases the costs for traders of imported goods. Personally, I believe some of the cost is being passed on to consumers. That's why you see that, for example, the imported food index rose by about 8% in February. But I don't think they are fully pushing this on to consumers for several reasons. Some producers will feel that they can't pass on the full costs. So we'll be trying to restructure costs by cutting expenditure on some items, like I mentioned earlier, or considering a reduction in their staff or in salaries and so on. And in the next few months, we'll actually be clear what these producers are doing. Also, the fact that the prices of many of these foreign goods in the international market has actually been staying constant, even some dropping. So again, that takes a bit of the sting out of the impact of inflation in the country. There's also the possibility of a lag effect. Now, Nigerian producers don't go to the import market on a daily or a weekly basis. When they go, they usually import all the raw materials they require for 3 to 6 months. So it is possible that it is when they start to run down on stock, when their stock start to get depleted, that they will now feel they need to go back and need to import markets. At that time, that some of these companies will actually feel the impact of higher costs as a result of the depreciation. So a lot of things, like I said, can be influencing the muted impact of the depreciation on our inflation rates so far. Also to add this again, another misconception is that only about 20% of the consumer price index, that's about 64 product categories of 740, actually made up of imported items. So contrary to what people believe, I don't believe Nigeria is import dependent. Import is a significant part of our economy, but I do not believe that we are import dependent. I think import dependence is more of a phenomenon that you find in urban areas. But you have to remember that we're more rural than urban as a population, and majority of those that live in rural areas are not importing many of the things we in urban areas consider to be luxuries. They're not importing. How many times does the man in the village import
sorry, Dr. Khaled,
or gas cookers and so on? Even in the rural and urban areas, sometimes you import that in the
Dr. Khaled, may I quickly interject there? We apologize to our viewers for a bit of the poor audio quality, a bit of a crack in there due to the connections. Dr. Khaled, stick with us. I have one question also for you. Now, I'm sure you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Khaled, I just want to ask, if we take out imported food sub-index out of the broader food index, what does it tell us about the state of food prices locally in Nigeria?
I think that you will find that there's an increase in agricultural output. Tubers actually are the largest. We spend more on tubers than any other food category in the country. I think after tubers, then we have general cereals rather, and then maybe rice. I think rice comes third. Out of those, it's only rice, I guess, that you say has a significant that we import significantly. Even that has reduced slightly. So there is an increase in agricultural output, and because of this, it's creating a situation where food prices are not rising as fast as they used to historically. Now, I'm not saying food prices are going down. Inflation by definition means prices are going up. But the pace in which food prices are going up recently seems to be slower. That's as if you move out the imported food part of it than it used to be historically. That's what the numbers are showing us.
Okay, a final one for you, Dr. Kale. We apologize for the poor audio quality this morning due to the connection there in the network. Now, give us a sense of where you think inflation is headed in the near term with a figure that's just breaking here on Channels Television.
Well, you know what I said again is that we would see. I gave several reasons as to why the depreciation may not have affected domestic prices currently, and like I said, it's difficult to predict what will happen in the next few. It depends on what producers do. Like I said, if they choose to lay off staff, or to reduce advertising, marketing strategy, or to reduce wages of staff, as opposed to passing on the cost to consumers fully, then it's going to have a very limited impact on food prices. If they believe they can pass on the prices fully, then it's going to have a bigger impact on food prices. So far, in terms of domestic food production, it seems as if that's going to continue to increase. The trends that we are seeing so far is that output of agricultural products are increasing. So I don't know. Again, it's going to depend on how the costs associated with production, from the increase in the worsening rather of the exchange rate, how it plays out. But at the end of the day, it will depend on the interaction between money supply and output, which one dominates.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Kale, we thank you for coming through to us today. Dr. Yemi Kale, Nigeria's Statistician General, on the February Inflation Report, breaking live here on Channels Television. Now, when we return, we'll take a quick look at the headlines. Stay with us.